As usual with anthropology, it's useful to look at the historical context in which all of these developments happen. And certainly there's an argument to be made about the technology itself changing. So people are able to communicate across longer distances. And so therefore we think about how we could perhaps communicate along larger distances. And that much is true. But technology does not only serve the purpose of communicating with aliens, it also allows with aliens to communicate with us. And for a pretty good time in the context of where these aliens came from, the idea was that they could easily visit us as much as we could visit with them. The result of that is that certainly aliens in this context could be from outer space. They could also be from across the pond or from just not too far along the way. An example in this book here from the Battle of Dorking, published in 1871, which was very important in British literature because of its description of an invasion that came to England. The author is an army lieutenant, or lieutenant, I guess, if you're British, who is describing what is happening in the days leading up to 1871. And you asked me to tell you, my grandchildren, something about my own share in a great event that happened 50 years ago. 'Tis sad work turning back to that bitter page in our history, but you may perhaps take profit in your new homes from the lesson it teaches. For us in England, it came too late, and yet we had plenty of warnings if we had only made use of them. The danger did not come on us unawares. And so the story tells us about this change that is happening little by little, slowly, these hints of things going wrong in his homeland, and the especially ramping up in the final days before an invasion that's coming from people that are not described. They are kind of an invisible enemy for a very long time. And as a result of that, there's a lot of anxiety that develops and builds up over the course of the book as to the changes that are happening in society, the fear of what is happening, and kind of the news of those aliens having a lethal weapon that they could use at any time and destroy their civilization. And they are trying to organize something based on what they felt was happening, and based on what they could expect would happen as a result of that. And kind of like the War of the Worlds, when this book came out, it created somewhat of a panic for a lot of people because it seemed very realistic that an army lieutenant described an upcoming invasion by an upcoming danger. The reason for that is that 1871 is a time when Germany and the Bismarck's rule was growing into the world, and the invaders, it turns out, in the Battle of Dorking are Germans. There was a war in 1870 between the Prussians, I guess, at the time, and England over the Channel. And the story that is told here is the story of that war, not of another a kind of alien invasion, as it turns out eventually when the the invaders eventually are identified by speaking German, but they have no good way to communicate because they don't speak the same language. So sind Werke Soldaten dieses Englischen Freiwilligen, said a broad-shouldered brute, stuffing a great hunch of beef into his mouth with a silver fork, an implement I should think he must have been using for the first time in his life. "Ja, ja," replied a comrade who was lolling back in his chair with a pair of dirty legs on the table and one of the poor Taver's best cigars in his mouth. Sie so guten laufen können. Jawohl, responded the first speaker, aber sind nicht ebenso schnell wie die französischen Mobloten. So perceiving these people as invaders, perceiving them with their language, perceiving them with their quote unquote rude manners of putting their feet on the table or whatever, certainly changes the perception of who they are, at least from the point of view of somebody whose country has just been invaded. But again, right, these invaders are not coming until the last 10 pages of the book, and you could very easily miss the fact that they are, in fact, just people. But that is probably in itself there the most distressing part of these aliens is that they may be kind of like us. They may do the same things that we have done before, and that is probably the most frightening thought of all. So, looking back at what Carl Sagan is saying in 1966, there are other possibilities which cannot be so easily dismissed. One of the primary motivations for the exploration of the New World was to convert the inhabitants to Christianity, peacefully if possible, forcefully if necessary. Can we exclude the possibility of an extraterrestrial evangelism? While American Indians were not useful for any concrete tasks in the courts of Spain and France, they were nonetheless transported there for prestige purposes. Is this an emotion alien to extraterrestrial civilizations? So that is a very present fear that keeps on coming up here. What if these aliens did the same thing to us as we have done to others, and kind of forcing us to confront our past, our colonial past, our religious past, perhaps our human trade past slash present? So things that we know are entirely possible to us, but we kind of don't like to think about, somewhat of a historical taboo, which would become very real if it came from another place, and which we would have to respond to. And you would also have to realize that your response to this kind of alien quote unquote invasion would have to be forceful, would have to be very radical in a way, and in a way that we would not necessarily tolerate if those same people that we have subjected in our past did the same. Again, if they do what they are feeling. So obviously, if those quote unquote aliens were like us, or even almost exactly like us in the way that they deal with our own reactions and the way that we have perceived our own existence, there's quite a bit of room here to make these aliens very horrible by making them, in a way, very human. And this is something that is also happening quite a bit in the stories that we find of aliens in the 20th century. Their behavior in a way that seems almost human and sometimes almost modern, because of course we could think of these aliens as being pre-modern insects and savage hordes, as they have been mentioned historically. We can also think of them as being extra proficient in terms of technology, and that is a very common way to do that now. But they could also be in the same kind of mode of thinking that we are. And in the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, or the book itself is just called Body Snatchers, but the movie that was based on it is called Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You have somewhat of a similar attitude here, that the aliens are not coming by force, they're not coming with armies, they're not necessarily coming with any kind of visible aggression. They're coming with the tool that is the most common for capitalism these days, which is to buy things. They buy people, they buy land, and as a result, the humans become themselves alienated in their land by those aliens that are just essentially playing the game of the free market. So, as you surmised, so this is the background to this. I kind of don't want to assume that everybody has seen that movie or read the book. The novel takes place in California and in Marin County, which is a place where the inflation in outside of LA has been the most tremendous. And they are invaded by seeds that are drifting from Earth and coming into space. And so there's a couple of reports of people finding the seeds and scientists finding them, but eventually the stories are suppressed through a mix of censorship and kind of a very cunning intervention from the aliens, because of course once they turn into seeds, the people are replaced by an exact physical duplicate, and so the people themselves become aliens once they are contaminated by those seeds, and they become essentially no longer human, even though they look human. So the human victims are, in other words, disappear, but they are replaced with a human looking alien. And so the main character speaks to one of the scientists who found the seeds. As you surmise, the pods are in a sense seed pods, though not in the sense that we know seeds. But in any case, they are living matter capable, just as are seeds, of enormous and complex growth and development. And they did drift through space, the original ones anyway, over enormous distances and through millenniums of time, just as I told you. Though, of course, he said with a polite apology, I tried to phrase it in a way to cast doubt over the notion. They live, however. They arrived on this planet by pure chance, but having arrived, they have a function to perform as natural to them as are to yours. And that's why you must go through the change. The pods must fulfill their function, their reason for being. And what's their function? I said sarcastically. The scientist shrugged. The function of all life, everywhere, to survive. And well, this is what those aliens are trying to do. They're just trying to live, just like you and me. The novel itself ends marginally better than the movie. If you are interested in watching the movie and or reading the book, with the aliens eventually figuring out that the in the book is that the people are a little bit too rough and tumble for them, and it's not worth their effort to try to contaminate all the humans. Um, but feel free to refer to that as this point of reference for the kind of aliens that are out there. But the way that they can be like us, even though through different means, so whether it is through a slow contamination, through a slow replacement of the population, this is also a matter of people being put in this sense of knowing things, experiencing things as humans, and what we assume other people can experience as humans, and again, kind of developing that sense of empathy towards others and what makes them finally others. The fact that they look different from us, the fact that they think differently from us, maybe the fact that they behave differently from us, whoever we are and whoever they are, of course, this could come in any shape because these are blank slates we're working with. Um, the the possibility of these humans, so in this case here, they walk like men, being entrepreneurs and buying a place, and in this book, the aliens are kind of bowling balls. They or their natural shape, quote unquote, is bowling balls, but they can take the shape of humans if they want to, and as part of that, they become real estate entrepreneurs. You've never smoked? She asked. I shook my head. To keep your sense of smell, she asked. My what? Your sense of smell. I thought you might be in some sort of work where sense of smell might be an asset. I had never thought of it that way, I said, but perhaps I am. She picked up her drink and looked at me closely above the top of it. Sir, she said calmly, evenly. Would you like to sell yourself? I'm afraid that one got me. I didn't even stammer. I just stared at her, for she wasn't kidding. She was businesslike. We could start at 1 million, she said, and bargain up from there. I got my mental feet back under me again. My soul, I asked, or the body all? With the soul, it would come just a little higher. You could keep your soul, she told me, and the offer comes from you. She shook her head. Not from me. I have no use for you. You represent someone. Someone perhaps would buy anything at all. A store and close it down, or an entire city. So here, the alien serves as a middleman who has no scruples and just buying people for the use of her owners, of her masters, and offering the possibility of this body that seems to be useful for somebody else, that seems to be valuable to be purchased, like a human, that we see an economic value in our others, that their unique ways of life, maybe their unique ways to think or to feel things, is something that is valuable to someone, which again, right, would be valuable to an alien, but we as humans currently don't seem to see that value in others, in other people's expressions of themselves. So again, trying to see how they could be more or less like us, more or less like us, I suppose. The reading for this week is from Ursula Le Guin, or Le Guin. I tried to figure out the good way to pronounce her name, and I don't know what it is. So the most common way to say it is Le Guin. But anyway, the name is written there. You can figure it out. She is the daughter of an anthropologist and wrote science fiction books. And this particular book in the reading is kind of a thought experiment. And I highlighted one paragraph or one chapter in particular that's only a few pages long for you to read. If you want to read something else, other parts of the book, please again feel free to do so. This was just this widely available novel. The book is kind of a thought experiment, which presupposes some changes in the world and kind of looks at the consequences of it. So this is speculative fiction, as we would typically call it these days. Uh, um, so the humans in this context did not evolve on Earth, but on a planet called Hine, and the people of Hine started colonizing other neighboring planets, including a place called Terra, that would be the Earth, and Gethin. So this happens in the distant past, and in the time where, well, as far as the book is concerned, this happens in a distant past. As far as so the action of the book itself takes place in our distant future. So essentially, the idea being that this is how we, the humans, would get to colonize other planets. Over the years, and eventually find our way to living on other planets, but still being more or less humans. And in this context, again, the humans are quote unquote seeding other planets with test populations to see how they would survive, and kind of creating these genetic experiments, if you will, kind of on other planets to see how they would work. But because of time separation, because of various implements, the planets kind of lose contact of their former test nations, and they evolve a life of their own. And well, so the book here tells of the discovery of one such planet where the people have evolved to be different from us. It seems likely that they were an experiment. The thought is unpleasant, but now that there is evidence to indicate that Terran colony was an experiment, the planting of one Hainish normal group on the world with its own proto-hominid autochtones to the possibility cannot be ignored. So again, Terran's Earth, and Hainish would be humans that are living in another planet. Human genetic manipulation was certainly practiced by the colonizers. Nothing else explains the Hills of S or the degenerate winged hominids of Rokanan. Will anything else be explain Gethenian sexual physiology? Accidentally? Possibly. Natural selection? Hardly. Their ambisexuality has little or no adaptive value. So the people found in this particular planet here don't have a good reason why they are men or women. They are more or less the same. So men and women have the same biological, emotional makeup in every way, shape, or form. And as a result, they don't seem to have any good reason to have gender-based relationships for work, for sex, for anything of the sort. Although, if they want to have sex, there is a sexual period once a month where they are both men and women able to reproduce, and if it happens, they become more obviously male or female, so they display their female attributes more specifically. But even then, there's no come on. And there's no specific attraction from men to women, specifically because they see one another as neither men nor women most of the time, and this is just for the matter of sexual reproduction alone. So they kind of adapt their sexual behaviors to the rest of their lives rather than adapting the rest of their lives to their sexual behavior. Um, so again, right, just another way to think of what aliens could be, if they could be just like us, or if they could be kind of the opposite of us. And in the end, perhaps at the end of the day, they might be kind of nothing like us, like these blobs here from Star Trek, these kind of aliens that are made out of silicon rather than carbon, the way that we are made. Kirk and Spock find these blobs in a cave, and Spock attempts to mind control the creature, but the only thing that he perceives in this creature is pain. I guess mind meld, not mind control, but you get the idea. So he tries to perceive the thoughts of the blob, and the blob only feels pain, and so the Spock tries to make sense out of what this blob actually wants, even though they seem to be hostile in a variety of ways. The reason why they are hostile is because they are trying to protect the eggs that you can see in the background of this particular image here, and they feel threatened by these humans coming up here, and the result of that is they become seen as they become seen as dangerous to us, even though their own view is self-preservation. Again, is just living, and the reason why any of this is happening is that there is another, and in this case, who is the alien, right? The person who is coming to your place, or you coming to their place. Um, and well, again, so these creatures are based on a completely different material from us, which is something that we are currently investigating right now because we have, for a very long time, as far as our science is concerned, assumed that our existence is the only kind based on carbon, principally. On the carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. As far as we know, these are the necessary components for life. But we are now able to create more complex basic molecules using silicon. So we know there is a possibility to do something life-like. Obviously, we are not able to create life or even define life in any scientific way. So that wouldn't be helpful. But we know that we can create a life-like matter using silicon instead of carbon. So there's a possibility that there's also a completely different, entirely different foundation for life out in the universe, because the universe is infinite, and it therefore has infinite possibilities to be different from us. And well, at the end of the day, this is really what all this comes to is those aliens are there to make us think about exactly difference and similarity, and it just makes you wonder what it is to be like one of those characters. And in H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, there is that very specific statement of the person kind of just wondering, the protagonist kind of wondering, well, what is happening? Yeah, who am I in the world? And so they're dealing with these tripod squid-like things that are much bigger, much more advanced than anything in the world, and humans, as a result, find themselves in a position of inferiority, which again, our normal understanding of ourselves is as this kind of apex predator, this very smart, very powerful type of thing, which we don't have a decent adversary for, at least on Earth. But these giant robots are much more powerful, much more vicious, much more much more yeah, powerful than anything we can imagine. So the character have to rethink of their position in the world. Perhaps I am a man of exceptional moods. I do not know how far my experience is common. At times I suffer from the strangest sense of detachment from myself and the world about me. I seem to watch it all from the outside, from somewhere inconceivably remote, out of time, out of space, out of the stress and tragedy of it all. This feeling was very strong upon me that night. Here was another side of my dream. But the trouble was the blank incongruity of this serenity and the swift death lying yonder, not 2 miles away. There was a noise of business from the gasworks, and the electric lamps were all alight. I stopped at the group of people. So this person here is kind of thinking about who they are compared to these robots, to these aliens, and they have to reconnect with another human to figure out who they are as people, and what it is to be human, knowing that in that moment, well, they are the blank slate. The aliens themselves would typically be considered the blank slate, the one that could be anything, but in the end, yeah, humans could also be anything. And even though they have assumed very specific identities of men, of women, of strong, of nations, of predators, of animals, and whatever, none of these things are very relevant based on the very, very grand scheme of things that is much larger than any one of us could really think of.